Hi everyone, Elsie Jensen here. Today we are going to make some epic breakfast sandwiches on some leftover sourdough bread with homemade hash brown patties, bacon, eggs, cheese, and then we're going to whip up some spiced apples and some homemade granola that we'll toast up in the oven. So let's start by getting our bacon cooking. I've got a half of a big pack of bacon in here. I'm going to spread it apart and we're going to do kind of just our crazy little fry on it. But I have them cut into half strips. That way they'll lay nicely on our sandwiches. And then I'm just going to use my tongs here and pull them apart. And then we are going to start on our granola and then, of course, our spiced apples. And then we'll shred up some potatoes to make our hash browns, which I think is going to add just this great crunch to our breakfast sandwiches. It's also just a great way to use some leftover sourdough bread if you have it, because I'm going to bake up another loaf tonight with dinner. So, because I love to have a nice hot loaf of bread with dinner and it will go well with our dinner tonight. We're going to do a roast chicken. And there we go. Okay, so I've got this. I've got it on high right now. And then once it kind of starts to sweat out its fat, I'll turn it down to a medium because I want my bacon to kind of crisp up in its fat. And if you cook it on too high of heat, what will happen is you'll burn it before it's released out its fat. Okay. While that is warming up, we are going to make a homemade granola. So this is going to be a honey, vanilla, cinnamon spiced granola. So we are going to start with, I've got a 4th cup of melted butter, but you can also use like coconut oil, olive oil, any type of fat that you want, but we're going to use a 4th cup. So I'm going to add that into my bowl here. And then we're going to use a 3rd cup of honey. I actually picked up this honey yesterday at the apple orchard. It has a big honeycomb in, and all the kids have been wanting to eat bites of the honeycomb today. And I told them, I was like, I don't know if you guys are going to actually like the honeycomb. It's very waxy. Teddy absolutely loved the honeycomb. He kept coming back for more. So we're going to use about a 3rd cup of honey for this. There we go. And see if I can catch that in there. And excellent honey. I wonder if it's got a unique kind of tanginess to it. And I wonder if it's because from the apple orchard, there's a lot of different apple blossoms over where the traditional honey that most people have is the clover honey. So we're going to put our 3rd cup of honey in here. And then I'm going to get out a little spatula here. Just scrape out the rest of this. There we go. And then kind of just start mixing the butter and the honey together. Then we're going to add in a half a teaspoon of vanilla, a half a teaspoon of cinnamon, a pinch of salt. And that's really going to be the base for our granola. So I'm going to do a half a teaspoon of vanilla. So not very much, but just enough to give it a nice smooth flavor to it. And then I got to open up. This is my new cinnamon because I just finished up my big tub yesterday. We're going to do about a half teaspoon of cinnamon in here because I want it to be a more mild cinnamon flavor instead of a super strong one. And you'll have all that honey flavor. So again, I'm going to mix this together. Then we'll do a little pinch of salt. And then we're going to add in our oats, our pumpkin seeds, and our chopped walnuts. And we'll coat everything, and then we're going to put it in the oven to bake at 325 for about 25 minutes. We'll have to take it out about halfway through to flip it so it gets a nice crunch up on it. Okay, now that our bacon has got a good sizzle and it's on it, I'm going to turn it down to my lower temperature here. Again, because you want that fat to come out nice and slowly so you get a really crispy fry on it. There we go. Let me get my spoon rest here. Now let's add in So I put my pinch of salt in there. Let's add in our oats. We're going to use 2 cups of oats. I like to use old-fashioned, but you could also use quick oats, or you could use a combination of old-fashioned and quick. I just wouldn't use the steel-cut oats. So we're going to do 2 cups. So 1 and 2. And we're going to put in about a 1/4 cup of pumpkin seed. You could also do sunflower seed, but I really like the pumpkin seed in it. And I'm just going to kind of do what I think a 1/4 cup is in my hands. And I actually don't have much left, so I'm just going to put the rest of it in there. And then we're going to do about a 1/3 cup of chopped up nuts. I'm using walnuts, but you could use pecans, almonds, you know, really anything. And I want about a 1/3 cup. So it's going to be kind of like a good handful or so. And then we're going to mix this up all in that nice kind of honey, butter, vanilla, cinnamon, and salt mixture until we've got it all kind of coated. Here we go. Now you could also throw in some raisins if you wanted to, or dried cranberries. But I'm keeping mine kind of simple today because we're going to actually serve it over our spiced apples. And then if you have yogurt, you could have the spiced apples, yogurt, and the granola together. I just love granola. There we go. And you can make it in so many different flavors, and it's actually quite easy to make. Okay, now that they're nice and coated, I'm going to get my parchment-lined baking sheet, and we're going to spread it out on here. And you want to make sure it's on the parchment because otherwise it can stick to your pan, and then it's kind of a pain to flip. So we're going to spread it out, and then I'm going to try to make sure it goes all over. That way it will kind of crisp up nicely, and some of those chunks will stick together, make those really nice globs of granola. It's always like the jackpot when you get the really big one. And I have been making homemade granola, and I have a lot of different recipes that I do for it since, I was in middle school. That's when I first started making homemade granola. And it's because I used to love going to Whole Foods, and in their bulk section, they had all of this granola, but we didn't go to Whole Foods often. So I then learned how to make it from then on, just kind of like experimenting and trying things out. And now I have like a whole collection of it, kind of do with different, you know, spices and mix-ins. Okay, we've got this all in here. Delicious. Okay, and turn this. We'll give our bacon a quick little stir, and then we're going to pop this in the oven at 325. And we're going to bake this. It's going to bake all together for about 25 minutes. But the trick is to get that nice crunch on it. You've got to flip it halfway through. Otherwise, your top will get really toasted and your bottom will be chewy. So we're going to put it in here, 325. And I'm going to set my timer here for about 12 minutes. That way I can come out, take it out, flip it, flip all the granola over and pop it back in for the final.
I do have a question. What's the butter and honey measurement?
So it is a 1/4 cup of melted butter. You can also use oil or melted coconut oil, and then a 1/3 cup of honey. And it just makes a perfect kind of sweetness. I really like mine with butter because it kind of gives you that more savory flavor. But I've also made it with coconut oil, which gives you a little bit of a coconut flavor, and olive oil also works really well with it. Okay, let's get our apples. We're gonna make some spiced apples. We went to the apple orchard yesterday, and we have a lot of apples. And so I went through, washed all of them up, and then I kind of put all the ones that gotten a little beaten and bruised by Jack mostly. And there's a couple of them that have like little teeth marks in it because he kept trying to eat the apples as he picked them. So we're going through our ones that kind of took a beating first. And we're going to turn those into some delicious stuff while the rest of them are kind of sitting in our refrigerator out there. These are actually Jonathan apples, which are really great both for eating and for baking with. They have just a really lovely flavor to them. So we're going to peel the skin off because I'm not a really big fan of skins on like when I make cooked apples because the skin remains really tough and doesn't get tender. So we're going to peel these off and then we'll do a kind of a like a coarse chop to our apples. Now you could take the time and slice them up nicely if you wanted to, but I'm just going to do a coarse chop. And then we're going to cook them. And today, actually, since we have apple cider from the apple orchard yesterday, we bought like 2 big gallons because you've got to love just like fresh pressed apple cider. I'm going to use a little bit of that in here instead of lemon juice, which I often use with my apples to kind of keep the tart flavor and a nice texture to it. But we're going to use about, I think I have about a 1/3 cup of apple cider here. Again, most of these, if they're a little bruised, that's fine. I know that was from Jackie picking them up and then throwing them halfway across the apple orchard. And then I'm like, we can't do that. But he had fun. So that's all that really matters to it. I said it hit his little half peck that he picked were not the most glorious of apples. My oldest daughter, she was the one where like, okay, you've got to speed it along here. She was going to every single tree, rating every apple, and would only pick the best of the best. And while everybody else had filled up their half peck, she had like 3 apples in her. She was being very, very selective. And I was like, okay, it's time to fill it up now. We all want to go to the big playground. But she had a lot of fun. But oh, look here. You can see little Jackie tooth marks on it from yesterday. In there, all of them. Wasn't fast enough. And then he didn't quite understand why I wouldn't let him just eat them all. There we go. Let's give our bacon a quick flip here. I'm going to turn it down just a smidge. There we go. Now, if you like the skins on, you can definitely keep them on. But like I said, they remain kind of tough. They're not soft like a pear or a peach skin. So I do like to peel them off, especially with the little ones, because the little ones can sometimes choke on the skins because they are chewier and they don't break up. Well, I'm going to wait to kind of chop up that that one so I can get these kind of cooking. So again, I'm just going to do just a kind of a coarse chop on it for our spiced apples. This will just allow it to kind of cook up a little bit faster. Now this will be great. We're just going to eat the spiced apples with the granola, but it would be great with like vanilla yogurt with it if you want to do almost like a spiced apple parfait. It would be delicious. I rarely do anything with yogurt because I do not like yogurt. I have everybody else in my family like it, and I will buy like the little yogurt cups for them. But I do not like yogurt, and I do not like pudding or anything in that texture. You know, everybody's got to be a little bit weird, and that's mine. I just can't do it. So we just have the spiced apples with granola. But if you love yogurt, it would be great with a vanilla yogurt. Okay, let's get these guys in here and we'll have them start kind of cooking up with there. And let me grab, I have my little butter right over here. I'm just going to put in a little bit of butter because we are going to use just a little bit of cornstarch to help kind of make a little jellier base to it. I'm going to do about 2 teaspoons of butter. Let me turn that on. And I'm going to give my bacon a nice little flip. See, it's a nice thing about doing the bacon in little strips like this is it actually kind of cooks up a little bit easier than the longer ones if you're doing a kind of a crazy fry on it. And we want to have a nice kind of crispy bacon. There we go. Okay. Let's get a spatula.
Do you have a question? Do you put apples in your stuffing when you make it?
I do not put apples in my stuffing. I am a savory girl, as in I don't like a lot of sweet things with foods that I think should be savory. So I don't do a lot of like fruit in my savory dishes, which I'm working on because I realized everybody in my family likes that. And I have spread out and I'm doing some more. Um, and I'm sure I would actually like it if I gave it a chance, but I have it's like a mental thing. You got to get over that hurdle. So I don't. I've had it before where people have put like cranberries or raisins or apples in their stuffing. It's just not my jam. But I do love I make a lot of times what I do will save like some crusts of sourdough when I'm getting close to when I'm going to make stuffing for like Thanksgiving and make homemade stuffing using that. And what I typically put in my stuffing is celery, onions, kind of a sage sausage, and then like chicken broth. And that's what I use to kind of make it. And so growing up north, I like in the Midwest, I should say, it's not really the North, but we always had stuffing, which was in the turkey. And then on the side is what they call dressing. And in the South, dressing is really, really big, but stuffing is not. And I personally think the stuffing that's stuffed inside the turkey is better than the dressing on the side. It has more flavor, it's moister, and it's delicious. But I found that in the South, they are very divided about that here. Here we go. We'll get these last ones up as I've got my pan kind of heating up. Here, I'll add in my thing. I have about a third cup of apple cider. Now, I'm using apple cider, not apple juice, because apple cider is just got a better flavor to it. Apple juice I find is really, really sweet. And so I'm just using that in place of lemon juice. A lot of times I squeeze like a juice of half a lemon over it to give it that really nice kind of tangy flavor to it, while also giving it a little bit of liquid to help make these apples nice and tender. Here we go. Okay, let's throw this last one in. And let me pick out that seed. There's always an apple seed that gets in. We're going to give this a quick little stir, and then I'm going to add in my brown sugar and cinnamon, and then again another little seed. How did I miss all these apple seeds? And then a little bit of vanilla as well. Look at that, 3 apple seeds, guys. Okay, our bacon is cooking up pretty fast here, which is great. We're almost ready for that. Perfect. Okay. And I'm going to get our spices in here and our vanilla and our sugar. So we're going to do I'm just doing a capful of vanilla, which is about a teaspoon or close to a teaspoon, like a little less than a teaspoon. I just want a little bit of that vanilla. It actually, I feel like, makes all of those flavors of the cinnamon and the tartness of the apples blend really well together. And then I'm just going to do a loosely kind of packed half cup of brown sugar. I'm not going to pack it down. So it's going to be probably closer to a third cup, between a half and a third cup. I don't want a lot of sugar in here because you've got the apple cider and you've got the natural sugar in the apple. So you don't need to add a whole lot more to make a really good, delicious, like spiced apple. And now we're going to add in our cinnamon. I'm going to do a nice sprinkle over. It's going to be about a teaspoon of cinnamon here. It's kind of a nice dusting over the top. And then you're going to add just a pinch of salt. And that is just going to enhance those flavors. It's not going to make it salty at all, but it's going to really bring out the apple and the cinnamon flavors. Here we go. And now we're going to let that butter and that sugar and all of that stuff start to kind of cook up and tenderize our apples. And our bacon here is just about ready. So I'm going to grab a small plate and a paper towel to let those kind of sit out, because we'll be putting these on our sandwiches in just a little bit. So let me get that prepped. because you always want to take your bacon out and put it on paper towels to suck up the extra grease. That's going to make it nice and crispy. If you leave it in the grease or just put on a plate, it will get hard instead of crispy, or it will disintegrate. Okay, while that's finishing up cooking here, I'm going to turn it down to low. It won't need much time. Let's shred our potatoes here because we are going to make some homemade hash brown patties that we will then put on our sandwiches. And they're going to add a nice little crispy, savory flavor to it, and it's going to be delicious. So I'm just using russet potatoes. I feel like they make really great hash browns on here. And all you have to do is give them a good wash, which I already did. And then you don't have to peel them because when you grate them, you're actually not going to have that much skin per potato on here. Okay. Let's take a quick break because our granola is ready. So what we're going to do, I'm actually just going to bring a big spatula over with me. And we'll flip it over here so we can pop it right back into the oven. So here is our granola. It's about halfway cooked on here. And again, the reason we flip it halfway is because you want it to get nice and crunchy on both sides. And if you leave it just on the top, what happens is the top gets really crunchy, but the moisture stays on the bottom. And we don't want that. We want a nice crispy granola, not a chewy with burnt ends. Let's get that up here. So again, making sure I've got it all spread out. And there we go. And then I'm just going to pat it down. And that's going to kind of allow some of those big chunks to stick together. Let's get my hand in my little paw here. And then, whoop, almost had it go flying off. Okay. Let's set our timer here and we'll do the final 13 minutes. And our granola should be nice and ready. And I'm hoping everything else will be just about then too. I'm going to give my apples a quick little stir here. You can see they're really starting to sweat out. And I will say the smell from the apple cider is really, really fragrant, which looks delicious. And then our bacon here, I'm going to turn it off because it is ready to come out onto our paper towel and to start kind of getting nice and crispy. There we go. Now this is a thicker cut bacon, which means the thin cut bacon is going to get you the nicest crunch on it. Thicker ones will be crispy but chewy at the same time, which I think are actually really nice on sandwiches because I find if you get them too crunchy on sandwiches, then they don't always, they're harder to eat. Here we go. So we're going to let that sit. I'm going to keep a little bit of my bacon grease because we're going to be using that to fry up our eggs here in just a little bit. But let's get these hash browns starting to go. And they don't take long to cook up, so that's a nice thing about them. And this is something you can do when all you have is just some potatoes around because they're really simple to make. Okay, I've got one potato pretty much done.
You have a question? What did you do to the apples?
With the apples, we chopped them up, and then I put about a third cup of apple cider in there with about a tablespoon, like 2 teaspoons of butter, like a loose packed half cup of brown sugar, and about a teaspoon of cinnamon, and a half teaspoon of vanilla, and a pinch of salt. And we're going to be cooking them in our little kind of, that's a cast iron, like small Dutch oven. Until they get nice and soft. And then towards the end, I'll add in a little bit of cornstarch to thicken it up to make it a little bit more jelly. And then we'll serve that with our granola on top. But at home, if you have vanilla yogurt, you could definitely make a spiced apple parfait using that, layering the granola, the spiced apples, and the vanilla yogurt. And it would be delicious. Okay, let's get this guy down. There we Now you could always, I will say, like you can always buy like hash browns at the store, but making your own are just really simple and delicious. There we go. So you can see 2 potatoes, and I didn't even shred them all up. I always leave that little nub. Makes quite a bit of hash browns. So we'll have a good amount here. Before I start mixing these up, I'm going to pour my olive oil in here to start getting nice and hot so that we can start frying these once I have them all seasoned up. And I'm just going to put a thin layer on the bottom of my pan. We don't need a whole lot of it. I don't need them to be submerged. I just need them to have the bottom completely covered so that they can crisp up on both sides. We're going to get it nice and hot. And then I'm going to season mine up today with some green onions, onion powder, black pepper, and garlic salt. So again, keeping it really, mild. I'm going to just cut off the whitest parts of my green onions, and then we're going to snip these in here. This is going to give it a nice kind of bright onion flavor to it that I think will be lovely. Chives would also work really great in here as well. You could also throw in some minced up parsley if you wanted to add another pop of green too. There we go. So I'm just going to leave that kind of tip parts because those get a little bit chewy. So we've got 2 green onions chopped up in here. Then I'm going to add in about a tablespoon of onion powder. This is going to give a really great savory flavor, and it's also going to kind of help as a little bit of a binder for these.
I have a question. How many potatoes did you use?
Just 2. So 2 potatoes are going to make a lot of hash browns. They're a good size russet potatoes, but 2 is all you need. We're going to do about a teaspoon of garlic salt, and then about a half teaspoon of black pepper. A little good shake over. Then we're just going to mix these together. There we go. And I will say they smell delicious already. And once our oil is nice and hot, I'm going to smush and like kind of make a potato pancake out of each one and fry it up in our oil. But you want to wait. You need your oil to be nice and hot while you do that. So I'm going to wash my hands real quick. Now, unfortunately, stealing bacon. I hope it was hot. He regrets his choice. It's still very hot. But hash browns aren't something you can prep in too long in advance because potatoes will turn brown. Or actually it's kind of like a purplish color when they sit down or oxidize. So I always like to shred them pretty much right before I'm about to fry them. So I'm just giving my apples a little stir here, and then I'm just going to again push it all down below that kind of juice, and we're just going to let it simmer. I have it cooking at about, I'm going to turn it down to about a 6 right now. I want it a little like a medium high to where it's nice and hot, but not to where I'm going to scald it or turn it to candy. While we're waiting, we have some of our sourdough bread that we made the other day. And I'm just going to slice this up because these are what we're going to use as the base for our sandwiches today. Because sourdough bread is just the best. And then I'm going to actually cut it this way. But here, this is actually, we ate the whole middle of it. It was like a loaf that big. And we ate the middle parts to make some things. But this is, you can see like kind of a little bit, the nice little peak that it was. Just imagine it. In here. And then of course we have our lovely kind of golden brown crust and our crumb on the inside. Just lovely. Now the way I'm going to cut these, instead of cutting them like slices that way, I'm actually going to cut them this way because I can make more sandwiches that way out of it. So we'll have our little ends, which will actually make really great croutons for our for a soup or a salad. So I will save them because that will make homemade sourdough croutons are amazing. They're so much better than store-bought ones.
How many pieces of bacon are you going to need for these sandwiches?
I'm not answering that because my husband is going to eat the bacon. That is not a real question. I see through your games. I need them all, including the one you already ate. So your sandwich will have one less slice of bacon on it. Okay, let's get these all kind of sliced up here. And it's okay if I've sliced too many because whatever I'm not going to use, I'm going to put in my for croutons. But we've got all of ours nice and hot here, or nice and sliced and ready to assemble. My oil is starting to feel nice and hot. I'm going to test it with a little drop of water, see if it sizzles. We've got a great sizzle. I'm going to turn it down to about a 6 now. And let's start forming our patties. Now with this, you want to kind of flatten them almost like a pancake. Squeeze out any of that extra liquid.
You have a question? Can you freeze down the extra sourdough bread?
You can, yes. A lot of times I will save it for a, like to make stuffing and whatnot. So yes, you can definitely freeze it down. You just need to make sure that you wrap it up and really tightly, and you then put it in another container to keep it from getting like freezer burn. If there's any like openness to air, it can really taste bad when you defrost it. There we go. And I'm making them nice and big because I'm ideally will use just about one patty per sandwich. Now, a lot of times I'll make these and I make them smaller and like little kind of, half like dollar discs or a little bit bigger than that. There we go. But again, make sure you squeeze out that extra liquid on here because you want them to be as crispy as possible. There we go. Give my hands a quick rinse now. And those are going to get just lovely. I'll put my bacon right over here. Should probably just move it away from that side of the counter. I'm going to put my bacon grease up here because we'll use that in just a second. But I want to start kind of toasting up my sourdough bread that we're going to use for our breakfast sandwiches. But again, let me give these apples a good little stir. We're going to keep cooking them until they all start to get more translucent. And then towards the very end is when we'll add in our cornstarch because we don't want them to get, if you add it in now, then you'll have to turn the heat off because cornstarch will thicken it up and then you'll burn it. Okay, let's get our bread. I'm going to put a little bit of butter on each slice. I'm going to first match them up and find their mates to make good little sandwiches here. So, pretty good mate. Let's see. We'll do it like that. I'm just going to cut off this little ridge. Otherwise, it won't toast. Okay, so now they all have their little mate. And we're just going to put butter on one side of each one. And then I'm going to toast it up. So just a little bit. I'm going to put my skillet on. And I'm just kind of knowing that this is the top and this is the bottom. And I'm just going to toast this here so it has a nice crunch. You could also do it in the oven if you wanted to. You could do a lot more, or you could do it in the toaster if you're making kind of a smaller batch. But I've got my skillet here, so I figured, why not? And you don't only one side because the inside of the sandwich doesn't need to be toasted like with butter on it because that you'll have all the goodness in there. There we go. And I will know when our hash browns are ready to flip is when we get a nice kind of golden brown area kind of forming the whole outside of our hash brown. You don't want to flip it too prematurely or you're going to end up with a like chewier hash brown instead of a nice crispy one. There we go. So we've got all of those toasting up here. I'm going to grab my spatula here and see how This one's getting close. You can see we've got some brown edges forming, but you can tell my other two still need a little bit more time on it. Looking good. Okay. Let's give this a good stir, and then we're going to start to kind of fry up our eggs here because we're kind of getting down to the final countdown. Get that toasting. Oh, before we do that, let's go and grab our granola out of the oven. Now with the granola, you've got to let it cool for a few minutes for it to crisp up. So once it comes straight out of the oven, ooh, perfect golden brown color to it. Look at it, looking lovely. But once you like put it in there, it's chewy, but once it cools, it gets hard and crunchy. That's just because you need the sugar to harden and kind of the cooling part, or the honey, I should say. So here we've got our nice kind of golden brown toasted here. We're gonna give it a nice, again, I always like to flip it when it comes right out, but it will have that nice kind of toasted, delicious flavor to it. The butter gives it a kind of a more golden brown color. If you use coconut oil or olive oil, you'll have a slightly blonder looking granola, but I prefer the flavor of butter.
You have a question? Is this sourdough bread the one from last night?
This is actually, we ate up the one from last night. So this sourdough is from the night before then. Last night's didn't last. So it's the same, pretty much same thing, but yes, it is. This one's 2 days old, which is, I think, even better for like toasting up because it will have a more of a nicer crunch on it and less like humidity or moisture in it. There we go. So we've got one of our patties just about crisped up here. I'm going to check on my sourdough and see how it's looking. We've got all that butter is starting to melt. Excellent. Looking good. I'm going to just kind of move my inner ones. That way they all kind of toast up evenly. Look at our I wanted to say potatoes here, but these are not potatoes. Look at our apples. As you can see, you're starting to get ones that look more translucent. And when I say translucent, they start to get brown. They don't look as opaque like the lighter ones that are more white. Those are opaque. When they've got the nice kind of darker brown color to them, that means they're going to be nice and soft and tender.
You have a question? How can you store sourdough to keep it from getting hard as a rock?
So it's a tricky thing with sourdough. I always say you've got about a day and a half before it starts to get firmer. I find if you seal it in an airtight container, that helps it kind of retain its moisture and keeps it soft. But even I find that after 2 days, sourdough is better as toast. And when you toast it up, it's great. But it definitely does get firmer that way. It's not as soft as with a traditional yeast bread.
And you do the blonde.
Yes. Oh, and the blonde roast, the blonde bake. I don't over bake my sourdough. So as you can see here, it has a nice, lighter color on it. I find when you toast it to where it has a really dark crust on it, that makes the crust the next day rock hard. But if you keep it, you're still like, this is 2 days ago, and you can see we still have quite a lot of sponginess, and it's pretty soft still. And that's because I'm not over baking it to get that really brown crust. I prefer a much better blonde bake because I think it makes it to where it's not so chewy, or not, keeps it chewy, but it makes it to where it's not rock hard. And that's the way I do it when I bake it up. I bake mine up at, 500 for 20 minutes and then 450 for 20 minutes with the lid off. And it makes the best. I do have a sourdough I can't say it. Tutorials. There we go. My brain is somewhere else today. On there that shows like step to step how I make my sourdough bread, from literally you can start as early as making your own starter to then the whole lamination, stretch and folds, cold proofing, and everything process. Okay, We are getting some great toasting up on here, which is looking good. I'm going to turn my skillet down now to nice and low. Beautiful. We've got some that are perfect. And then let me grab a plate and a paper towel because we're going to start taking off our first set of hash browns here. And let me grab my spatula. And you're going to want to put these on our paper towel to absorb up any of that extra grease on here. You want to put it the oil side down. That's going to help keep it nice and crispy on there, which will make it delicious. And then let's pop our next ones in. And then let me see how these are cooking good. I'm gonna actually move them around, but let's get our next potato patties in here. Because again, I'm aiming for about 1 patty per slice of bread or per sandwich. Squeeze out that extra juice. And let's make our last one because I think we'll have 5 sandwiches.
No question. Is there any egg binder in the potato?
No egg binders. Now, sometimes I do put egg in it depending on what type of, hash brown I want to make. But today it is just onion powder acting as keeping it together, and then just really firm pushes like together. And this I find gives you a really crispy fried potato. When you do the egg, you get a little bit of a spongier middle. So again, sometimes I do it that way, but sometimes I just like to keep it simple as well. And just do onion powder as kind of the main thing. Whenever I do egg, I add in a little bit of flour too, to kind of take out some of that moisture. Okay, let's do.
Did you have a question? How's Teddy doing?
He is doing fantastic. So for those of you guys who don't know, Teddy had his tonsils out about a month or so ago. And it was a rough recovery from, he had his tonsils and his adenoids. But he's doing great. He's a full recovery, like eats everything now under the sun, sleeping great, talking better, sleeping better. So it's actually doing really well. I'm going to turn this on to about a medium heat here. We're going to fry our our eggs up in our bacon grease here, but I'm going to pour out a little bit of this because I don't want too much bacon grease or it's going to make them really greasy. So I'm just going to do residual, like a tablespoon in there. And then if you just take, let me turn this down a little bit. You just take a paper towel, you can get some of those more burnt bits out and pick them up. That way you're leaving the good bacon grease, but you don't have any of those burnt bits in there. Let me get these flipped real quick because looks like they're toasting up quickly. Beautiful. That one needs a little bit more on this side. We'll do a quick rotation. And then let's fry up our eggs. So I'm heating up my pan, and then we're going to add in our cornstarch with our apples because they are almost done. So I've got this on about a 4 right now, and we're going to add in each egg and let it kind of cook up. I like to do my eggs over easy, which means I'm going to flip them and cook them for about 30 seconds right before they're done. And that just allows you to get a nice kind of crispy edge on both sides while still leaving the yolk nice and runny. There we go. So we'll save 1 egg on here, and then I'm going to let this kind of cook up. I think this guy is ready to flip. I gave him a little bit more time. There we go. And now let's get our cornstarch over our apples to let it kind of thicken up. I'm going to turn my apples down now to about a 3, so a lower temperature, so it's not too high. And
you got a couple more comments that you need a cookbook.
Yes, it is goals. It is goals. I'm I'm working on it. I've got 5 kids here, and kids are not so much the thing. It's youth sports. And I love that they're in all these activities and they want to do everything under the sun. But sometimes these time commitments are a bit much. I was literally had to drive an hour this morning to um, another town for soccer. My daughter does ODP, which is Olympic Development Program. For soccer, she made like the team. So we had to go there this morning, and then she has another session this afternoon. So after we eat lunch, we'll drive another hour back there to do it. And then she has a session tomorrow morning. We were supposed to do a session yesterday, but I decided that the apple orchard took precedence. But it is very busy in this household between the 5 kids and all of their activities. Here we've got our eggs, or not our eggs, our apples cooking up in here with our little bit of our cornstarch in there to kind of thicken it up into a nice kind of jelly base to it. I'm going to actually add just a smidge more apple cider to this. I want it a little bit more runny. There we go. This is where we went yesterday, to Jackson's Orchard in Kentucky, and their apple cider is amazing. Their apples are delicious. It was an actually really fun day. But let's get all of this in there. I'm aiming for, I want a sticky kind of gel, but I don't want it to be so thick that it's thing. So I'm adding probably about another 1/3 cup of apple cider in here, but look at how delicious those look. And this apple cider is going to give it an even tartar flavor, which will be wonderful. Okay, let's check these guys out, because then we can start assembling. Still needs a smidge more. So let's cook those up. I'm going to put a little bit of salt on my eggs, and then we're going to do our over easy. And then this, you guys could always see my expert flipping skills. I'm terrible at flipping eggs.
You've gotten a lot better.
I've gotten better, but I will say I'm just not patient when it comes to flipping eggs. And so a lot of times I don't use the gentle touch that is required. So I'm going to first cut them each apart. Now, I will say having a really good nonstick pan makes it a lot easier. That's why I love the Hexclad, because it does create a nice nonstick surface, which works a little bit better than if you're using like a metal pan. There we go. Just make sure they're fully cut apart on this. Okay, good. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I turn my pan off for this, because you don't want to overcook that side. Otherwise, what will happen is you will have a cooked egg all the way through. And then we're just going to flip them over. This is called our eggs over easy. Of course, I did not flip that one well. Fixed it. And there we go. See? It's not gentle. Okay, so pretty good. Only one cracked on there. Leave it on there 30 seconds so the heat is off. 30 seconds on there, and then we're going to pull our pan away from that to put this residual, because you don't want it to cook too much. Okay, let's slide that over here. And now let's get ready to assemble these delicious sandwiches, because our hash browns are almost done. So we're going to use cheddar cheese, but again, you could use any cheese that you like, but cheddar cheese is our family's favorite, although Gouda is a really close second. And we're going to just do a slice. Let's see, I'm going to have to pair these guys up so I know which one goes with which. There we go. Otherwise, I will put them together, and one will have a tiny one and one will have a really big one. So we're going to put our slice of cheese for each one. And I will actually move this skillet back over here, because that residual heat will keep that toast nice and warm. And apparently I only cooked up 4, and I thought I cooked up 5. There's my counting skills again. Well, that'll be fine. I'm going to turn off my back apples here. And let's put our hash browns on. So we've got our first one. We'll do a big one on here. Look at this beautiful crunchy hash brown both sides. And I'm going to grab one out of here. Let's see which one is the best cooked up. Ooh, that one looks lovely. I'm going to put it the hot side down so it starts melting that. I'm going to put this out. Then let's add our egg. Gotta be kind of like a conductor here. We're gonna put our egg on top. And again, it should be nice and runny still in the middle because we removed it pretty quickly from each one. And then we will add, got one extra egg over here, which we'll save for somebody else. We'll take this off. This will probably be Teddy's because he'll be like, cut it up again, scramble my egg. He always has to have his egg scrambled. And then let's not forget, let's put our bacon on here. So we've got our bacon, about 3 slices. They're half slices per each one. And I make sure I'll put 2 slices on yours because you ate yours already. That's what I always did. My stepdad growing up, he would always come and he would like take the food before it was finished. And then I always would be like, well, then you get one less piece on your plate tonight. Okay, look at our delicious, epic breakfast sandwiches here. Could have made 5 more if I had counted correctly, or could have made 1 more. But let's serve up our breakfast. So again, I'm going to slide this out of the way because we have our granola here. Oh, guys, look, it's firmed up. This is what I was telling you about. Once you kind of let it cool, it firms up into nice big chunks, which is perfect because that's the best part of granola. So I'm going to clean this up, and then we will serve up our spiced apples with our granola and our epic breakfast sandwich for a delicious, kind of easy Sunday brunch here. Okay, so here is our epic breakfast sandwich. We have our cheese, our crispy fried potato, our egg over easy, our bacon on our homemade sourdough bread that we toasted up on our skillet here. And then we are going to serve that with our apples that we picked from the orchard yesterday. So our spiced with cinnamon, vanilla, and apple cider for a lovely like tart flavor. And then we are going to top it off with our homemade granola that is chock full of walnuts, pumpkin seeds, cinnamon, honey, and butter for just a lovely crunch that we toasted up in the oven for a really delicious, easy, simple breakfast. And again, these sandwiches are going to be amazing because of that homemade hash brown patty on it. It's going to add the crunch and the savory and bring everything together. Well, guys, thank you so much for joining us here today. Don't forget to like and subscribe. I try to do live cooking shows every single day, kind of show you what we're making for our family and hopefully teach you guys something along the way. Again, we do upload all of our videos to the link on our page. So if you ever want to recreate any of our recipes at home, you can just go to that link, search for what we made. So our epic breakfast sandwiches, homemade honey cinnamon granola, and spiced apples. And you can watch and cook along with us again. We also have a link to our Amazon storefront that has all of our different cooking gear and gadgets in it. So I have all my Hex-Clad pans in there. I've got my Dutch ovens, my cutting boards, knives, all the different things that I use in the kitchen. I have in there for you guys to check out. But again, thank you so much for joining us here today. Don't forget to like and subscribe.